Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for U Sports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics with our second episode of the exit meeting interviews. The time of recording, we haven't released the first one, so it's a little confusing from our standpoint, but that's okay because we are expanding our horizons, heading from our normal comfort of the OUA out to the AUS, much like our guest did a little bit not too long ago. And we're going to talk all about his club, but first and foremost, before we do that, Tom, how the heck are you doing, my friend?
I am doing so well because we have such a special guest with us here, someone that I have gotten over the years to really admire. He is a Loney Bowl champion. He helped coach this Mount Allison team to their most successful season ever. He is a Yates Cup champion, and he is back home with those Mount Allison Mounties. This is Scott Brady joins us on the program here. Coach Brady, how are you doing today, sir?
Good. Happy New Year, fellas. Appreciate you guys having me.
Of
It's
course.
uh it's our pleasure. It's our privilege. Coach, obviously this episode's all about your program, all about AUS football. We're expanding our horizons. The folks that tune in and listen obviously have more of that focus on OUA, so getting to learn more about the football out east is major. But I think, time of recording, January 5th, given you being a guy in the OUA very recently, it'd be remiss to not get your thoughts on the news breaking today of Michael Falds signing with the Western Mustangs. I just got to rip the bandit off, get out of the way. What was your initial reaction to, I guess either Coach Marshall hanging him up, someone that, as Tom alluded to in that Yates Cup, you were victorious in over the legendary Coach Marshall and his Mustangs, or of a legend of his own right in Michael Falds taking over for the Purple Ponies?
Yeah, I think nothing but respect for the job Coach Marshall's done over the years. I mean, he's been incredibly successful at two different programs with, the championships they've been able to win at Western, and he built that place into a powerhouse. And even more than that, I think has mentored a lot of really great coaches. Like his footprints are all over the OUA. I mean, Waxman with the Tiger Cats, and you could go on and on. Coach Bertoya, the Cercelli's down in Windsor. Like, there's so many guys who have come through that program and gone on to be successful in their own right. So, I mean, when you see that, obviously he's done an incredible job and has passed that on to a lot of people. And then, I mean, Coach Faltz has been incredibly successful there. When I think his first year at Laurier, they were maybe 1-7 or something like that, and he's built that program into, one of the best in the country now. And obviously got the recognition with the National Coach of the Year this past year, and then an opportunity for him to go home. So, yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm sure they're going to continue to be super successful as a program under his leadership, and happy for him. And I'm sure it's great for him and his family to be able to go home.
Well, I mean, speaking of going home, you heading from my McMaster Marauders from the maroon to back to the garnet and gold, going into this season, obviously starting off and getting into a 1-7 season is not where you want to be, whatever else. But when you come into a program, coming back to a program, certainly with all of the extra things that are happening, winning is for sure on the mindset, but it's not the barometer for success. Victory in your senior day against St. FX to build and prove where you're going and building this program. I have to believe there are a number of things that you're really happy and proud about with this season. What has been this season like coming back to your alma mater and a place that you used to be a head coach, now a little bit older and much more wise when it comes to the coaching realm?
And not maroon. Uh, but no, it was awesome. It definitely felt like coming home. I think we talked about it before, but I was like really caught off guard with how overwhelmingly the positive the reception was. Especially when you've like left a place before, there's always some like trepidation about, how's it gonna be received, like if I do decide to go back there. But it was beyond anything that I expected, just to see how positive and receptive everybody was. And so that was really incredible right off the bat. Um, the first season, it was interesting. Like I don't think I've ever had anything like it. And we talked to our players about this, but like we started training camp and everybody's really building relationships with one another, like right from scratch, right? So I've never really started a training camp not knowing the guys in the program, and like so much of coaching is predicated on relationships and how and to be able to push guys, you need them to trust you. And really, we're asking and demanding a lot of them without having those pre-established relationships. So that was really challenging, and not just for me, but for a lot of the staff. Guys like Kelly Jeffrey and Andre Gauguin, some of the other guys who brought in, Pete Miller came back to the program. Like there was a minimal number of guys on our staff who really had these pre-existing relationships with the players. And so you're trying to change a lot of things. You're trying to install your own culture and schemes and everything else, but you're also just trying to get to know each other in a very short run up to the season. And so that was a really unique challenge. I was super proud of our guys for how they responded to it. I think what they were asked to do this year was really, really challenging and hard. But I think we all grew a lot from it. I think the relationships now are in a much better place as we got to spend time with each other and and they understand like what the expectation and standard needs to look like here. I think they've really embraced it. I think they've embraced like the organization and the attention to detail and some of the accountability that we've tried to put into place. And now I'm honestly just like really, really looking forward to having like a full off season with the guys where we can go through our workout program. We can do our morning workouts, like our identity program. We can get into spring ball and especially like for the offensive guys. I mean, they've been through so many coordinators on that side of the ball. This is going to be the first off season where they've had, a consistent coordinator, a consistent scheme that we can build around. Certainly we'll tweak stuff now that we have a better understanding of the personnel, but like those guys haven't had this here. It's kind of been a revolving door at the offensive coordinator position specifically. And so to have Kelly here to continue to work with those guys and them learn and grow in the scheme, I just think that it's all positive from there. So yeah, it was a super unique year. Super happy to be back, and I love the group of guys that we had here and how we've started to add to it. And I'm really looking forward to what's ahead of us.
Now, Coach, the idea of home has come up a bit in this conversation, and we're here, Tom and I, wearing these beautiful For the Family shirts that you and your program so graciously provided us for those not doing it on YouTube, you're missing out. That idea of family, what does that mean for you in terms of building that culture and what you're trying to establish there?
Yeah, I think that's what Mount A is. That's what it's always been. Anybody who's come through this program, who went here like myself, all my best friends, like I think that's the first word that comes up for so many of us. And so like when we came in here and we talked about like our vision for the program, it was hardest working, most connected team in the entire country. I think this second part, the part that I was curious to see is if that's still pleased to see that for all the things this group of guys had been through and had to deal with, they still felt incredibly connected to one another and really close. And that was what I love so much about Mount A. What I think I love football as much as anybody, but what I remember about it is like the group of guys that I got to play with and all the time that we spent not just at football, but away from it, like on campus in the dorms in town together. Like we loved it. It was a really special time in our lives. And so I think that part still exists here. That's never gone away. Like that's just what Mount A is, and it happens so organically here. Certainly we want to enhance that. And so, we've tried to be really intentional about some of the stuff that we do to enhance that sense of connection within the team. So things like when we're eating as a team during training camp, like the guys aren't allowed to have their cell phones in there. So they actually have to sit down and talk with one another and get to know their teammates, or if we're on the road traveling and that type of thing, like just making sure we're doing as much as we can to actually talk and get to know one another. And especially given this scenario I talked about earlier, like so many of us getting to know one another at the same time in really short order. I thought that was really, really important. But I do think it's easier here just because of the type of place that Mount A is. Like it attracts a specific type of individual. And People who choose to come to a small university, small town like this, beyond just the benefits that they see academically and the growth they see within the program. I think a huge attraction is they want to have those really, really close relationships with their teammates. That's really important to them. They want their teammates to be a huge part of their life, and not just see them at practice or at meetings, but they want to spend a lot of their downtime with them as well. And I mean, that's just what Mount A is. It happens without anyone really needing to push or make that happen.
Yeah, university, obviously speaking with you, doing a podcast before the season had started, and getting a sense of, how small the university is, short, but how tight knit everybody is there. We're walking down the street. It's during the summertime. There's no students there, and you still see a couple of waves, some people that recognize you. We're talking to a few folks. We're so happy to have you back. It's really an incredible thing. But even for yourself, getting you mentioned your offensive coordinator, getting a guy like Kelly Jeffrey to come back, your old head coach, being a part of this system and being a part of your staff again, and now just recently in the offseason, adding back another young man who's coming back home, and Cam Davidson to be that assistant offensive coordinator and help out with recruiting. Talk to me a little bit about the two of them in particular, having Kelly back, as having another young guy like Cam who's done such great work at Queens with the running back season.
Yeah, I mean, so even before I talk about that have chosen to come back this year, so the coordinators and the full-time guys are the obvious ones, but I think one of the things I was most excited about in deciding to take the job and come back here is the quality of staff that I thought we could get around our players. And there's just so many guys who have meant a lot to this program, who were around when we were really successful and won a lot of football games and understand what a championship culture looks like and care about this place. And so like we really prioritize trying to get in really good teachers and communicators, guys who have expertise in their position, guys who are going to invest in the kids' lives outside of football, and then also guys who have a personal connection to Mountain, who love this place, to understand like what it can be, and are going to invest the time to make that happen. So, guys like Andre Gauguin coaching our offensive line coordinator, run game. Matt Rose is our strength and conditioning coordinator and receivers coach. Pete Miller was, our defensive line coach when we had all that run of success before. Right through our Ross McCormick is in that category as well. Like right through our coaching staff, there's guys who really care about this program at a high level. And then, in terms of the full-time staff, Kelly's the best coach I've ever worked for, so having the opportunity to get him around our players again, I know how impactful he was for me as a player, and especially as a young coach, like learning how to actually be a coach and what it needs to look like. He just made such an impact on me, and so to have this next generation of players have a chance to be impacted in the way that I was, like I was just ecstatic for them, and then from a personal standpoint. We both left Mount A at one point, and him to go on to the CFL, and then me to go to McMaster. And so, we would always keep in touch uh, over the years, and we would talk about how cool it would be. You've had kind of a and having the chance to bring back some of those ideas that we got from other places, and just to be around each other and enjoy like coaching together again, I think is such a cool experience. And then this off season, we had a chance to complete kind of our full-time coaching staff. So bring in, Cam in as our assistant OC and recruiting coordinator, and then Will Mulligan in as our defensive coordinator. So Will's kind of in that category of, he was Mount A guy. He played for me when I was here before. And then he was our assistant defensive coordinator when I was the DC at McMaster. And so like we won a Yates Cup together there. The guys absolutely loved him in that program, loved working with him. He's one of the smartest football minds I know. So he's going to do an awesome job with our defense. And then I think Cam was a really unique opportunity I was excited about because he's coming from a super successful program in his own right. So, I mean, Queens is just coming off winning a Yates Cup this year. He's an East Coast guy, so he understands like the environment out here. And I think he's super high energy, super passionate. Like I can't wait for him to get around our players. I think his energy and enthusiasm is infectious, but I also love the idea that we're bringing somebody kind of from like outside the program in a way, and somebody who's seen something that we haven't and has seen and experienced the championship culture in his own right. So I'm honestly just excited to pick his brain on some things. Like, I know they do a phenomenal job with their off-season workout program there, and that's something I've talked with Coach Schneider about. And so just to pick his brain on some of the stuff that they did that they like, and seeing how we can enhance our own culture and our own program, I think is really good. So I'm super bullish about our staff. I think we've got a great group, and I think we've really enhanced it through this off-season.
Well, Coach, that idea, whether it's in relation to yourself or some of the coaches on your staff, of leaving Mount A and then to come back and the things you learn from your stops along the way. Tom and I talk about this frequently, of the sort of stylistic differences you sometimes see one conference to the other. Are there things that, when you think about from your time both playing at Mount A and your first stint coaching there, to then your time being in the OUA with McMaster, to now being back in the AUS, of things that you would categorize as OUA type football versus Atlantic football, or anything else in between?
That's an interesting question. There's differences for sure. I don't think of anything as like this is OUA style football, this is AUS style football. I think there's differences in how you build the team, how you prep for games week in, week out. Like the simplest version of it is in the only way you're playing a different team every week. You want to be successful, right? So that's a unique challenge in its own right. Not better or worse, just different. In the OUA, you're kind of worried about how are you going to deal with like the 2 and 3 back run game of like a Western or Queens, but then you have to be able to go out and face like a really good spread team that's going to give you like throw the ball a bunch, give you empty sets, like a Carleton type of equation. Here, I mean, especially now you've got who you're going to play. Like you're basically prepping for like 3 or 4 offenses, right? And so what you're going to see, but I think the challenge week to week is everybody knows each other at such a high level. Like there's really no secrets out here. Like how you match up with the other team week to week. Like there was one year at Mac, I think it was coming off of COVID, but we played Queens and we hadn't played them for like 2 years, I think it was. And so that's much more of a guessing game. Like you're going in there and trying to like kind of guess off of the film of how you match up. Like I think this guy can cover that guy, but you're not 100% sure. Like here, week to week, you're going to know if there's somebody you can't cover or if there's somebody up front that you can't block. And they know that as well. And so they know your team really intimately and vice versa. And so they know your tendencies, they understand what you are. And so how do you have the little subtle variations week to week, or how can you build off something or show something that you showed the week before and give a different look off of it? Like it's just a different challenge. And so they're both unique in their own right. And then, I think the other thing that you're dealing with out here is just like, how are you going to build your roster, right? And so I think there's a small pool of really good players out here. There's about 50 high schools in the Maritimes between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia that are playing high school football, right? And at one point, if you did like a 75-kilometer radius around McMaster, there was about 400 high schools playing football. And so, the high-end players out here, the high-quality players are just as good, but at some point it becomes a numbers game. So you have to make sure that you win a lot of those recruiting battles for the top local talent. And then how can you complement that by recruiting nationally and attracting some guys who fit our program and our culture from outside? But like you have no chance if you can't recruit at a high level locally here and get, your fair share of the best players in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia.
It's a credit to your university when you talk about some of the guys who are coming in. You didn't, I had a chance. Obviously, I heard about Will moving on because coming from McMaster going there. There's a lot of guys who are really happy for him and sad to see him go. And then I had an opportunity at a football combine back in November or December to speak with Cam and to see Cam out in the Oshawa region and just talk to him about what was going on and that he's moving back and everything else. And he just had this giant smile on his face. He was really excited. I'm like, you're coming off of a Yates Cup victory with Queens. Like, your coach, the running backs, if you were going to pinpoint one position group that's probably the best out of that entire team, maybe you'd go DBs, but like, running backs got to be up there with all the guys that he's had and what he's done and everything. And he just said, yeah, it was a special run. It was a great time, but I'm so excited to go back out east and to be in Mount Allison. And you start talking about so many of these players that, well, as soon as they go back, you start talking to them and they say, yeah, there is no other choice. I know I've told this to you, but a friend of mine is Robbie Baxter, who was an offensive lineman during the same times that Zach and I was playing out there. And he loves the university. He loves everything that you've brought to it. He leads your alumni group, if I remember that correctly, or is a big portion of that. It's just such an incredible atmosphere that has been built along with Mount Allison from just the university itself or from what you have done. And I don't think that's enough said to really, for people who don't know, because a lot of our people who are in the OUA don't get exposed to obviously the other schools across, but it is such an incredible community type that's out there. Even a funny story that I need to tell you, I ran into Pierre Arsenault, the youth sports CEO, and he came up to me. He was like, I heard your podcast with Scott. It was great. If you're also university. So if the head boss at youth sports is saying that, you got something there for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Beyond even just the staff, Wicker, Dakota area. So he lives in Brantford area, and he's basically done regional scouting for us, like London through like Hamilton area, and has done a phenomenal job building relationships with some guys in that area too. And to your point, there's just so many guys who love this place, who love their experience here, know the impact that their 4 or 5 years in Sackville had on their lives, and like they want to give back. They want to see the program do well. They were around like when the program was one of the best in the country, and so they know what it can be. And I think they have a good sense of how it can get back there. And I think they're making a big impact, pushing this program in the right direction.
Obviously, going into this past season, we had mentioned that you go 1-7, and you've got a number of players in here that, yes, they're in their fourth, fifth, and sometimes even sixth year with the COVID year and everything else who are here, but they're still all brand new faces to you and a lot of your staff that's there. Obviously, you had a stud in Owen O'Neill, who was your AUS All-Star as well, but him being in his last year and moving on as well, along with a number of other guys, there's a lot of turnover that's happening here, things that you're working things out as you're going. Playing against Acadia, St. FX, Bishops, obviously St. Mary's with how they won this year. It's a very tough schedule from that spot, especially when you came in after spring camp, so you don't get that chance to really assess and do everything else. So walk us through the season in terms of what you had, and then finishing off with, like I mentioned, that senior day victory over a St. FX team that's got Silas Fagnon, Malcolm Bussey, and some of the best players that you have in the AUS. To get a victory like that on your last home game must have been just an incredible experience.
Yeah, it's great. I was super happy for the guys. Like I think they deserve it. They did every single thing that we asked of them from the day that we got here. You could tell they were. I think there was an appetite for it. Like they really wanted some of the things that we put in place. I think they really embraced like the organization, the attention to detail, the accountability. I think they saw like a substantial difference in terms of what the expectations and standards were, and I think they were really pleased with it. But it's still hard when you just don't have a lot of relationships with the guys at the front of the room. So I think we made a ton of progress there. At the start of the year, like very early on, we had a lot of attrition from the program, just in terms of kind of raising the bar of what's expected from the guys, and I think it posed some challenges for us, especially the back half of the season, just in terms of like sheer numbers for practice and who we had available and how we could do things, how we run scout teams, how efficient we could be. But But I think the benefit that came out of it is the guys who stayed, the guys who are here, the guys who are going to be part of the foundation going forward, like they're all in. They want to invest a lot of time. They want to put in the work. Like they care about this program at a high level. They want to do more. They're not guys we have to push to work out or go to meetings or anything like that. Like they care and they want to win like pretty desperately. And so I think we've got a really good base to start building from now. But I mean, I think everybody in the program, when you talk to guys one on one, I think there was an overwhelming sense that everything was moving in a really positive direction. Um, but at the end of the day, you want guys to have that tangible success on the scoreboard, right? And that was kind of like the one piece that I think was missing for a short time. Like everybody felt really good that we were doing the right things week in and week out. They could see the vision, they could see the change, they saw what we were trying to do. And so to have their patience and trust rewarded by having a victory on the scoreboard, in second last game of the season, I think was great. And I didn't totally understand it even at the time, but we had nobody in our program who had actually even beaten St. FX during their career here. Which I didn't clue into until after the game. The guys were actually the ones who told me that. So I think that was even just like a big hurdle for them to get over because St. FX has been such a strong program in this conference for such a long time. They had their run where, they were winning championships and everything else. So I think that was a bit of a mental hurdle that I wasn't even necessarily expecting. But then we didn't play well the week after that. I mean, we had a chance to get into the playoffs and we didn't play good football that week. We had a chance to win and we made too many mistakes. And so I think that's also like a really key learning from our guys. I think the part that we tried to express to the players after the St. FX game, I think especially when you're trying to turn a program around or just a program that hasn't won a lot recently. I think winning football games can seem like this really uh, like mysterious thing or that something like incredible has to happen in the game. And really what we did in that St. FX game was very ordinary. It wasn't like anybody had like an otherworld effort. We just executed at a higher level than we had been. We had a good week of practice leading into it. We were down 20-3 at one point in the game, and the guys kept playing and didn't focus on the scoreboard. And, that was our best week in terms of creating explosive plays and eliminating explosive plays defensively. And then next week, we didn't do a good enough job of those things. I mean, we put the ball on the ground at like the 25-yard line with the chance to go in and go up 2 scores at the end of the game. And I think that's important for our guys to see that like what you did last week, good or bad, really just doesn't matter at all, and it doesn't put you any further ahead the next week. And those are all things that you just have to go through as part of the growing process. But I was really pleased for those guys because they did put such trust into us, and I was happy for them to have that on their senior day and get rewarded in that way. And certainly, we told the guys at the end of the season, like you alluded to, there's so many guys graduating from the program who aren't going to be here to see, the fruits of their time investment this season and be around when the program does turn the corner. But they need to know that they were a huge part of it. Like they were the guys who stayed here during a really challenging time. It's not easy as a player when you have a coaching change in the summer. Like that doesn't happen frequently. And so what they did was really hard, and they should feel really proud of all the time and effort that they put in. And when this place is one of the best programs in the entire country again, like they need to know that they were a huge part of that.
Well, and I think my internet went in and out a little bit there, so I apologize for that. That alone, though, Coach, makes me think of the great saying of societies are at their best when old men plant trees they'll never sit under the shade of, or however that goes. So I love that that's what you're instilling and trying to build in with that culture. The last big thing I wanted to ask you about, Coach, and we talked about this a little bit in looking at that aspect of winning your backyard out east and the difference of just the pure sheer numbers of high schools in the region compared to being in a football hotbed like Hamilton. But winning your backyard, that's number one for any school, any program, any region. What's the allure what is the draw? And I want it to be Mount A centered, but it's AUS kind of general, I suppose. Of what is that thing that makes coming out to AUS for a kid from Hamilton, a kid from Calgary, a kid from Saskatoon, across the country, from Laval, to say actually being out in the Atlantic again? We want them to go to Mount A, but any of those programs, what is it that AUS football has to offer that is the real big sell?
Yeah, so I think it's a number of things. So number one, I'm a big believer in the academic environment out here. I think it's a better fit for a lot of guys, frankly. And I think I can speak to it as somebody growing up playing high school football in Ontario. Like for the longest time, I just kind of accepted that university was going to be, big universities, big towns, big classrooms like that. That's kind of drilled into your head that that's what university is. And especially in Ontario, there's not really like a different option available to you there. So you kind of accept that's what it is. And then, when I had to take my own recruiting into my own hands and actually find like the best place for me, I kind of stumbled into Mount A and the fact that there was these smaller schools in the country where, there are 2,500 people there and the classrooms are much smaller and you can be in classrooms of less than 30 people and it's much more like the high school environment. And so, you know, that is how most of us learn best is when you actually have a personal relationship with the person teaching you, being in a 500 or 600 person lecture hall where the prof doesn't know your name or know who you are and you can't ask questions. You have no relationship with them. You're maybe talking to a TA. That's really not the best learning environment for most people. The fact that you can be in classrooms here, you can still ask questions, you can stop by your professors, they're much more approachable. If you just want to check, like if you're writing an essay, if you're on the right track with something and just pick their brain, like they'll actually take the time to talk to you. You can't find that everywhere, but that's what this place is. It's an undergraduate university, so we don't have graduate programs or anything like that. So everything is fully centered on the undergraduate experience, versus, professors at bigger universities who are very research focused and they're really there to do their research, but they'll teach because they have to. Even the professors who choose to come here, like they want to be in a smaller community and they value the teaching aspect and they value the relationship with the students. So first and foremost, I'm a big believer in the learning environment here, and I think it's better for most people if we're being honest. Okay, I know it helped me be successful academically. It's helped a ton of our guys be successful academically. So I'm a big believer in it. And I think parents as well see a lot of value in that. With Mount A specifically, you add that to the fact that we've been the #1 ranked undergrad school in the country, like 26 the last 32 years. The academic reputation kind of speaks for itself. So you can go to this really world-class institution, but also be in really small classrooms where, my 4th year here, I had a class with like 3 people in it. So then it's literally working one-on-one with your professor, just a really unique experience, right? So that's one piece of it. And then the second thing I would say is the brotherhood and the family atmosphere and the connection with the guys on the team is different. And that's something I always believed when I was here before. But it really got like solidified for me when I had a chance to go somewhere else and see something else. So I think when you go to university in, these bigger centers, bigger cities, there's just so much more going on outside of school and football, right? And so, the guys will be together at practices, at meetings, but then outside of that, they kind of like, splinter into smaller groups and go do their own thing. Or if you're in a place like Hamilton, Toronto, London, any of these places, there's just a lot more to do. Here, there's fewer distractions. It's easier to focus on school and football, and everything socially is just about being with the guys. It's much less about like, where are we going tonight? What are we doing? It's all about who you're spending time with. And so, if somebody is just looking for the best party atmosphere, they're not going to choose to come to Mount A. The people who choose to come here, they value the academic environment that we have, and they value those relationships with the guys on the team. And they want to be in a place where they are spending a lot of their free time with their brothers on the team and forming those really unique and special bonds. And I think this is the best place to do that. And then for us specifically, I think right now all they see is opportunity. Like I think they see the vision for the program and where we're going. I think they see the commitment and reinvestment from the university, from our alumni, from our investors. They see where this program is headed and they feel like they can be a big part of pushing this in the right direction and getting this place back to one of the best in the country. And um, yeah, that's maybe less a draw for East than maybe more us specifically, but I do think the environment here is just very different and frankly something a lot of people are looking for.
Hmm. And so I'm interested. Obviously, when I had the chance to speak with you back in, I believe it was May, we had talked about a lot of the things that you would learn when you were here, just the getting exposed to different mentalities and different atmospheres and that. One of the things that you said you were most excited about was bringing some of the recruiting practices that you learned from Coach Knox back to Mount Allison and really expanding out that standpoint. From what you just spoke about in terms of the culture of not just Atlantic Canada, but specifically for Mount Allison, if you're getting a kid, especially a kid who's not from the East in particular, if they're flying in or something else, how are you best kind of communicating to them or showing them what that culture looks like if you've got a day, a night, maybe a weekend with them? It's a really short time to expose them to everything that Mount Allison has to offer here. So how has that evolved from when you were first coaching till now as an experienced coach with that extra experience?
Yeah, so I think the structure as a whole, some of the steps that we take through the process and the timing of things is very different. But fundamentally, the most impactful thing that we do is we get them around our players. And that part has never changed, right? The steps that we take and when we get guys to campus and how we do game day visits and some of the other stuff we incorporate, like there's a lot that's been added there. But again, at the end of the day, if we do a good job asking the right questions and spending time with guys and properly vetting them and what they're understanding what they're looking for, and we get the right people to come visit this campus, it really does sell itself. Like the guys who are looking for, the smaller schools, the smaller classrooms, the more personal relationship, and then like the incredible connection with their teammates, if that's genuinely what they want, they get here, we get them around our players, and they see that it is special and different than most places. And so that we tell our guys all the time, like at the end of the day, our players are our best recruiters. That's never going to change. And we don't tell them to sell anything. We just tell them to be very honest with the guys when they're visiting with them. Every program has their strengths, weaknesses, things they like, things they don't like. The players in any program are always going to be the best source of information for any recruit, right? So we encourage guys, like if you know people in any program, not just ours, ask them about it, ask them about their experience, ask them, what the coaches are like when it's not a recruiting visit and they're actually spending time with them in meetings at practice, that type of thing. And I think our players are super honest about their experience here. They tell them why they chose to come to Mount A. They tell them about the direction the program's headed in, the changes they've seen. And I think the things that they share have resonated with a lot of people so far.
Coach, I realized I did want to ask about, we talked about the news, kind of the OUA, but also from the AUS RSEQ news of late with Bishops making the return back to RSEQ last 7 years or so for Loney Bowl appearances. They won in 24, obviously had a big impact while they were there. Justin Quirion, his time of late. What's been just in any conversations you've had with your coaching staff or just sort of around the league, not just losing a team, but one that had been very strong over the last few years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that we all had a sense it was coming, whether it was this year or next. It was probably just going to be a matter of timing, right? Like at the end of the day, for Bishops to be competing in our league was a pretty significant financial commitment on their end. That was always going to be challenging for them to sustain year over year. And I think that was only increasing in time, right? And so you start to evaluate like we're spending all this to travel and go play in the AUS versus if we invested this into our own program, what would that look like? I think starts to be the calculus that they have to weigh. But I think for our league, it's pretty unique, but we're really in a lot of ways getting back to what the AUS has traditionally been. Like there was the RSEQ interlock for a long time. So at one point, you were playing 2 games a year against the Quebec League, then it became one, then it transitioned into Bishops being in our league. But if you go back pre 2002, like this is what the AUS has really been for most of its history, and especially some years where you look at like the St. Mary's era, like early 2000s when they were the best team in the entire country. Like this was a 4-team league, and that's what it was. And so I think we and our alumni are pretty excited to get back to some of the historic traditional rivalries we have in this league. I think when you play a team 2, 3 times in a season, like I said, you get to know each other pretty well. But as you guys can imagine, that creates a certain level of intensity within the players between the teams as well. Uh, and so, you end. I think the rivalries are incredible in this league. Like there's good rivalries everywhere. But we kind of joked about because one of the ideas that got floated this year was the idea of like a U Sports rivalry week. And so somebody asked like, who would your rivals be? And you're just like, it was really hard to pin it down to one. Like you end up having this awesome rivalry with just about everybody in the league because you know each other so well and you compete against each other so often. So it'll be unique for sure going back to the 4 teams, but historically, I mean, that's really what the AUS has always been, even when we were, had some of the strongest teams in the entire country. So it'll be exciting to get back to that.
Yeah, for the folks that haven't, I guess, experienced this, but it's pretty common even in training camp. At least when I was out there and having conversations with Zach, you're in training camp with your own team, and after about a week of hitting each other every day, fights tend to break out because you're just sick of the other person, or competition's been happening, or there's been times where in the OUA you're playing against a team and maybe you lost, maybe it was an ugly win. You go, God, I'd love another crack at them. To have that opportunity in the regular season, and sometimes, like you said, meeting in the playoffs 3 times, maybe 4 times in a single season, you get a lot of opportunities to get to know somebody pretty well, and that can create some pretty nasty rivalries pretty quickly, I'm sure. So, from that standpoint, you start looking at the landscape of the AUS. And for sure, somebody that, like yourself, you are building towards something really exciting, really special for Mount Allison. You see Bishops that had the guys that were in that conversation in the upper tier. They leave and they go to the RSEQ. You've got a St. FX team that under Coach Waterman is always going to be really good, but loses now Silas Fagnon, Malcolm Bussey, a lot of those guys that made up that core of what really meant a lot and how those St. FX teams won are now gone. You start looking around and you say, yes, this St. Mary's team is young and they've got some players, but man, if there's if there's an opportunity that's just opened up for everybody else in the AUS to really say, not that it wasn't before, but to now especially say, man, anybody at any given point can really win here. For you yourself, you mentioned that there's a number of guys that are moving on, but with the culture, with how you guys are building, I have to imagine that this 26 season is going to be really exciting for everybody here with the opportunity that presents it to you.
Yeah, for sure. I think the excitement has less to do with anybody else in the league and just trying to focus on what we're building here. Like, I think we're going to be a very young team next year. I think we're going to have a big recruiting class coming in this year. And so we're going to have a number of young guys playing for us this year. And it's never going to be exactly like this, but I think back to when we were here before the championships we won in 2013 and 2014. A lot of the core of those teams were guys who came in 2011. Like 2011, we started 7 true freshmen just on the defense that year, and I think 8 for a couple games. I think we had about 12 or 13 freshmen starting for us that year. So we were super young. We weren't very good that year, but we had a really talented class come in, and they just got a ton of experience. They got to play a lot of meaningful snaps early in their career. And then, 2 years later, we won our first championship. The year after that, we went undefeated. This is going to be our first recruiting class coming in this year. I think we're off to a really good start in terms of the quality guys that we're bringing in, but still a lot of work to do here. And, the hope is that we can have a group that's just as impactful as that, or even more so. And we can have a lot of guys come in and play a lot of meaningful snaps early in their career. And that can really be a core part of the team that we build around as we get this place back where we all want it.
Coach, can't thank you enough for joining us, and I'll let Tom get his last thoughts out. You've already mentioned how the players are the best recruits at the end of the day, and you've already done a great job in selling the program. But let's just get your 60-second elevator pitch. Why should the young folks out there tuning in, watching, listening, make the decision to go play Mount Allison Mounties football?
Yeah, they want to be part of the hardest working, most connected team in the entire country, and they don't want to go into a program that's already at the top of the league and just kind of inherit that legacy. They want to come in and build their own legacy and make their own mark in the program and be one of the guys who comes in and takes this program from where it is and gets us back to being one of the best in the entire country. We have everything that we need to be successful here. University, our alumni have supported the program at a rate they never have before. And I don't think there's a better time to be coming into Mount A. We need some guys to come in and make a big impact for us. And I think the opportunity to do something really, really special and leave your own legacy is here.
Last question that I have, especially for any of our Mountie fans that are listening to this, you talked about how important and how incredible it is to come to this university, and there you could see a lot of freshmen potentially starting, depending on how things shake out in training camp and that. Do you have any young players on this team right now that you're excited about that Mountie fans should be looking out for as they make their mark either in 26 or you think in the future for their careers?
Yeah, 100%. I think we've got, I mean, there's a number of guys, but I'll start like Ethan McIntyre is going to be going into his third year. He's a defensive tackle for us. You know, Fredericton, New Brunswick guys played a lot early in his career. And so, I'm excited for him to have a full off season with our staff, a full off season in the weight room with some of the, turmoil or uncertainty around the program. He didn't really get an opportunity to have that. And so to have a full off season working with the staff, working with the guys that we're surrounding him with, I think he can take a huge step forward this next year and be an all conference type player for us. I think Henry Pierce is same idea, second year offensive lineman for us. And I think his leadership and toughness was obvious, like right from the second that we started working with him. He had a knee injury that cost him the second half of the season, but I think he was progressing on a really great track. And so I think he's going to be a captain, a great leader for us in the program. And I think he plays the game the right way. Like he's got the physicality and violence and the attitude that we want to establish in the line of scrimmage. So those are just two guys that we're going to lean on along the line of scrimmage. And then Justin Charles is a new recruit that we added this year. So he's on campus now. He's starting classes for us in January here, but he's a quarterback from John Abbott in Cégep. And so I'm excited to have him, but also excited to have him around for the entire offseason. I think coming into a training camp as a freshman QB and trying to learn in like 7 days is really, really challenging. And so to have the whole offseason to work with him, get him comfortable with the offense, have Coach Jeffrey working with them, learning our scheme, learning our players, throwing with our receivers. I think that's a really great opportunity, and he'll push the guys come the fall if he puts in the work. And he definitely brings like a dynamic element to the offense. So as we're trying to create more explosive plays, it's exciting to see where he can get to this offseason as well.
Two big boys and a quarterback. I love it.
He is the head coach of the Mount Allison Mounties, Coach Scott Brady. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Best of luck throughout the rest of the offseason, preseason, and going into, from everything you've been telling us, what is sure to be an exciting year of Mount A and AUS football. Thank you so much, Coach.
Thanks for having me, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Coach. That wraps up the second episode of our exit meeting. We've now gone OUA to the AUS. Next stop, we're heading all the way to the other coast, talking a little Can West football. Who we'll be talking about, you'll have to tune in right here at the 55.